Ohio was once pitched as the place you could ride out the chaos. When prices along the coasts surged and major cities spiraled into bidding wars, the common wisdom was that the Midwest, especially Ohio, would stay grounded. Modest home prices, dependable employment, and a sense that things wouldn't get out of hand. But here we are in 2026, and that narrative is starting to unravel, slowly but unmistakably. All across Ohio, warning signs are popping up. Price reductions are piling on top of each other. Homes are sitting on the market far longer than sellers ever expected. And people who felt insulated just a few years ago are beginning to realize that their footing isn't nearly as solid as they assumed. This is Discover the Cities. If you want honest, unfiltered conversations about where housing markets are quietly weakening before it becomes front-page news, make sure you subscribe now. Today, we're counting down 10 cities in Ohio where the housing market is starting to give way in 2026. Stick with us until the end, because the number one city on this list, Music Fades In, is still being sold as a revival success story, even while the numbers and on-the-ground reality are telling a very different story. Let's begin the countdown. Number 10. Springfield. Springfield sits between Dayton and Columbus, and for a time, that location felt like a real advantage. As buyers got priced out of the larger metro areas, they started eyeing Springfield as the cheaper alternative. They saw older houses with more space, bigger yards, and commutes that seemed manageable if you didn't mind a longer drive. Investors followed right behind them. Duplexes looked inexpensive. Single-family rentals appeared to pencil out. On the surface, it felt like an easy win. But beneath that optimism, the fundamentals never really caught up. Paychecks in Springfield stayed relatively low. Most jobs are tied to logistics, manufacturing, healthcare, and retail. Solid industries, but not ones that suddenly start offering big city salaries just because a few remote workers showed up. When interest rates climbed and inflation began squeezing household budgets, the mismatch between local incomes and inflated home prices became impossible to ignore. By 2026, that pressure is clearly showing up in the listings. Homes linger on the market. One price cut is followed by another. Sellers who thought they could ride peak pricing are slowly backing off, revising expectations as they chase a shrinking pool of buyers who can actually qualify. Some homeowners are feeling it even more acutely. Buyers who stretched with adjustable rate loans or thin savings are now juggling rising mortgage payments while nearly every other expense in their lives costs more too. Springfield also struggles with an aging housing stock and worn infrastructure. Many homes need serious updates: aging roofs, outdated wiring, drafty windows that bleed energy. During the boom, buyers overlooked those flaws just to secure a property. Now, inspection reports are enough to rattle already cautious buyers, and deals frequently collapse before closing. Even investors are pulling back. The easy cash flow story has faded as vacancies increase, repairs pile up, and insurance costs chew through profits. Quietly, many are admitting the numbers don't work the way they once promised. Springfield isn't the kind of city that dominates national headlines, but that's exactly why it matters. It's a clear example of how a mid-sized market can appear affordable on paper while still being overpriced for the people who actually live and work there. If low sticker prices are tempting you, it's worth taking a hard look at what those homes truly cost to own, month after month. Number 9. Lorain. Lorain sits along the Lake Erie shoreline just west of Cleveland, a city shaped by steel mills, shipyards, and generations of blue-collar paychecks. For decades, its housing market followed a steady, predictable pattern. Simple homes, reasonable prices, nothing flashy. That changed over the past few years. As investors fanned out across Ohio hunting for undervalued markets, Lorain started popping up on their radar. A lakefront city with low buy-in costs looked like an obvious opportunity. Many assumed it would mirror Cleveland's much-talked-about comeback story. Out-of-state buyers moved quickly. Single-family homes and duplexes were snapped up, lightly renovated, and relisted at higher rents and prices. From a spreadsheet perspective, it looked like progress. But on the ground, the economic reality barely budged. Most residents are still earning paychecks in healthcare, logistics, service jobs, or factory work. Those wages didn't surge just because investors arrived. Once interest rates rose and inflation drove up the cost of groceries, fuel, and utilities, The gap between local incomes and investor pricing became painfully obvious. You can see that friction play out in today's listings. Renovated homes in popular corridors linger longer than promised. Price cuts follow within weeks. Some properties go under contract at ambitious numbers, only to return to the market when appraisals come in low, or buyers realize taxes, insurance, and upkeep push monthly costs beyond what feels manageable. The lakefront itself adds another layer of risk. Harsh winters and storm exposure mean accelerated roof wear, foundation concerns, and ongoing maintenance. Insurance companies are paying attention, and premiums on older properties have been steadily climbing. Renters in drafty, century-old homes struggle with soaring utility bills, and landlords who pushed rents too far are learning there's a firm ceiling on what local workers can realistically afford. Lorain isn't imploding overnight, but it is flashing a clear warning sign. You can't just point to a body of water, a cheap purchase price, and a renovation plan and assume guaranteed returns. In 2026, the city shows exactly what happens when investor optimism runs ahead of the local economy. Number 8. Youngstown. For decades, Youngstown has stood as a national shorthand for industrial collapse. A city frequently featured in documentaries and news stories about shuttered factories and long-term population decline. In more recent years, a quieter, more hopeful narrative began to circulate. The thinking was that prices had already hit bottom, remote workers might drift back, and patient investment could slowly stabilize the city. By 2026, that optimism has run straight into reality. Youngstown's housing market shows just how hard it is to rebuild when the underlying foundation remains fragile. There have been bright spots. A few downtown loft projects gained traction. Certain blocks were cleaned up and reinvested in. A small number of new businesses opened their doors. But beyond those pockets, large portions of the city are still weighed down by empty lots, abandoned properties, and weak demand. When interest rates increased and outside money pulled back, that delicate progress began to wobble. Home values here never exploded the way they did in coastal markets, but even modest price increases can cause trouble in a city where incomes are low and often unpredictable. Many households are living paycheck to paycheck. A slightly higher mortgage bill, an insurance hike, or an unexpected repair can be enough to tip a family into financial distress. That's why foreclosure activity and tax delinquency notices matter so much in a place like Youngstown. They're early warning signals that the strain is spreading. You can feel that divide just by driving through town. One street might feature a freshly renovated house, new paint gleaming, and a for-sale sign promising a fresh start. Turn the corner, and you're staring at boarded-up homes that weigh down every nearby appraisal. Buyers and lenders are well aware of that contrast, and they price in the risk, keeping valuations suppressed even when individual properties are improved. For investors hoping to catch a comeback wave, 2026 has been a sobering reality check. Rents aren't climbing fast enough to justify the risk, and the resale market is thin and unforgiving. Number 7. Marion. Marion sits just north of Columbus, a small city shaped by rail lines, factories, and long blocks of aging single-family homes. For years, its housing market barely made a ripple. Prices stayed low, homes changed hands slowly, and most buyers were local families or small-time landlords who understood the area. That calm didn't last. When investors and remote workers started scanning Ohio for inexpensive housing, Marion suddenly landed on their short list. Properties that once lingered for months were scooped up quickly. Out-of-town buyers saw three-bedroom houses priced under $150,000 and assumed the only direction left was up. Quick cosmetic updates followed. Rents were pushed higher. Buyers convinced themselves they had discovered the next overlooked market. By 2026, the limits of that thinking are hard to miss. Marion's employment base hasn't changed much. Jobs are still concentrated in manufacturing, logistics, healthcare, and service work. Pay remains modest, and many households have little financial cushion. When inflation drove up the cost of food, fuel, and utilities, right as interest rates climbed, the pressure built fast. That strain shows up clearly in the data and in everyday reality. Newly renovated homes now sit longer than expected. Sellers who pegged their asking prices to peak comps are cutting numbers once, twice, sometimes even 3 times. Appraisals often fall short, forcing renegotiations or killing deals outright. Buyers who do qualify are hesitant, wary of committing to large monthly payments in a town where layoffs and reduced hours aren't unusual. The rental market is feeling it too. Higher rents collide with tenants who are already stretched thin. Missed payments, evictions, and unexpected move-outs chip away at the returns investors once assumed would be easy and predictable. And over time, older homes reveal their real cost: aging roofs, failing furnaces, and drafty windows that send winter heating bills soaring. Number 6. Warren. Warren sits in the Mahoning Valley, tucked between Youngstown and Cleveland, a factory town still trying to find its footing after decades of steel and auto jobs disappeared. For a long time, the housing market here barely changed at all. Prices stayed low, homes were old, ownership was stable, and the city dealt with a slow mix of population decline and postponed maintenance. Then the bargain hunters arrived. As prices climbed elsewhere in Ohio, Warren began popping up in investor forums and remote worker videos. The sales pitch was hard to ignore. You could buy an entire house here for what a parking spot costs on the coasts. Brick colonials, small ranch homes, even duplexes, all priced under $150,000. On paper, the numbers looked almost too good. Cash flow projections sparkled. Investors and out-of-town buyers moved quickly, scooping up inventory. Some put real effort into renovations, while others did little more than surface-level updates, or nothing at all, before raising rents. Prices edged higher, vacancies tightened, and the narrative became that Warren was finally on the upswing. By 2026, that optimism is running into clear limits. Local incomes never rose to match rising housing costs. Most residents still depend on modest wages from healthcare, logistics, small-scale manufacturing, and service jobs. Inflation pushed up the cost of food, fuel, and utilities at the same time employers were cutting shifts or freezing hiring. There simply isn't much room left in household budgets for higher mortgages or steeper rents. The consequences show up quickly in the listings. Lightly renovated homes priced at the top of the market are sitting unsold. Price reductions appear with regularity. Deals fall apart when financing doesn't come through, or inspections uncover problems that glossy photos conveniently left out. The gap between what sellers want and what local buyers can realistically afford keeps growing. Warren's aging housing stock only amplifies the problem. Old roofs, outdated electrical systems, damp basements, and worn-out furnaces all demand serious investment. On the rental side, the strain is building. Landlords quietly roll back rents or offer move-in incentives, while tenants, pressed by higher living costs, fall behind on payments or move more frequently. Every vacancy and unexpected repair chips away at those once-perfect spreadsheets. Warren still has solid neighborhoods and residents who care deeply about their community. But the margin for error is thin. Number 5. Dayton. Dayton sits at a key intersection of highways and air routes, with deep roots in aviation and manufacturing. In more recent years, the city pivoted toward logistics and defense-related industries, and for a while, the housing narrative sounded encouraging. Prices were relatively modest, commutes were manageable, and there was a growing sense that Dayton might quietly become one of Ohio's more dependable, low-drama markets. But stability only goes so far when most households have very little financial cushion. As remote work spread and investor money poured into Ohio, Dayton became another stop for bargain hunters. Neighborhoods near downtown and close to major employers drew flippers and landlords armed with cash and optimistic projections. Home values climbed faster than wages, and longtime residents began to feel boxed in. Some cashed out and left. Others became renters. Many stayed put and watched their neighborhoods transform around them. By 2026, much of that early enthusiasm has faded. Homes renovated and priced for top-tier buyers are taking longer to sell. The expected influx of higher-paid workers hasn't fully shown up, and several employers are moving cautiously when it comes to expansion. In certain areas, the market feels fragmented. Polished, well-staged listings sit alongside houses that never receive the upgrades they need, all competing for the same limited pool of buyers. Dayton also wrestles with infrastructure and quality-of-life challenges that directly affect housing demand. School quality and public services vary widely from one neighborhood to the next. While crime levels aren't as severe as in some larger cities, safety concerns still factor heavily into buyer decisions, especially for families. When a buyer can add 20 minutes to their commute and feel more comfortable, that option often wins. For homeowners who bought near the peak, particularly those with limited savings, the current environment is tense. Repairs can only be postponed for so long, but refinancing out of higher interest loans isn't always an option. On the rental side, landlords who expected steady rent increases to solve everything are discovering that tenants have firm financial limits of their own. Dayton remains a city where careful, well-researched purchases can still work. But treating it like a discounted stand-in for a larger metro is a costly mistake. The margin for error is narrowing, and that's why Dayton belongs on any honest list of Ohio housing markets facing real pressure in 2026. Number 4. Toledo. Toledo is a Great Lakes city with a proud industrial legacy and a present that's far more complicated. Its port, river access, glass manufacturing routes, and auto industry ties all feed into an economy that never fully settled into a single, stable identity. That uncertainty shows up clearly in the housing market. For years, Toledo ranked among the cheapest places in Ohio to buy a home. That reputation drew in investors chasing high percentage returns on low-cost properties. It also appealed to buyers relocating from more expensive regions who liked the idea of owning outright or carrying very small mortgages. From the outside, it looked like everyone was winning. Beneath the surface, the fundamentals were far less solid than the sales pitch suggested. Job growth was inconsistent. Population trends were flat at best. Some neighborhoods did see real improvement, but others continued to slide. Along certain corridors, aging homes sat vacant or poorly maintained, even as stronger areas tried to attract new residents. By 2026, those contradictions are much harder to ignore. The number of local buyers who can comfortably handle higher prices remains small. At the same time, out-of-town investors have grown more cautious after watching peers lose money in other so-called cash flow markets. Sellers holding out for peak pricing are meeting stiff resistance, and longer listing times paired with tough negotiations have become the norm. Toledo is also on the front lines of Great Lakes environmental challenges. Algae blooms, water quality concerns, and more frequent extreme weather have made buyers increasingly aware of hidden risks tied to certain locations. Flooding, sewer backups, and drainage problems raise ownership costs and scare off buyers who lack the funds or patience for ongoing repairs. For many properties, especially in weaker neighborhoods, the choice is uncomfortable. Either pour serious money into upgrades and hope a future buyer pays for them, or accept a deep discount now and move on. Neither option feels appealing when household budgets and investor capital are already under strain. Toledo serves as a clear reminder that low prices alone don't make a housing market safe. Number 3. Columbus. Columbus stands apart from the rest of this list in one crucial way. It has been Ohio's primary growth engine for years. A massive university, the state capital, major corporate headquarters, tech employers, and steady population gains turned it into the standout success story in an otherwise slow-moving state. Ironically, that success is exactly why the housing market here is feeling so much strain. During the era of ultra-low interest rates, money poured into Columbus from every direction. Apartment complexes rose quickly. Suburban subdivisions expanded outward. Infill projects popped up in trendy neighborhoods. If there was space to build, someone built on it. Single-family home prices in desirable areas surged as buyers fought to secure spots near favored schools, walkable streets, and convenient commute routes. The message was everywhere. Columbus is the future. Buy now or be priced out forever. By 2026, that narrative is showing serious cracks. In many parts of the city, home prices no longer match what local buyers can realistically afford. Even households with two solid incomes are feeling squeezed once you add up mortgages, property taxes, insurance, utilities, and lingering student loan payments. There's very little margin left for unexpected costs. At the same time, the rental market is starting to soften in certain segments. New luxury buildings are competing against one another with free months and move-in incentives. Investors who purchased second or third properties assuming nonstop rent growth are now running the numbers again. Some are quietly putting those homes on the market, hoping to exit before prices slide further. Columbus is also dealing with the growing pains that come with rapid expansion. Traffic congestion, crowded schools, uneven infrastructure, and constant debates over development are becoming everyday realities. Some neighborhoods feel like permanent construction zones, while others feel overlooked, stuck with aging housing and fewer services. That imbalance shapes where demand flows and which areas start to show slowdown first. For buyers, Columbus is no longer a guaranteed win. The real question isn't just whether you can get in, it's what happens if job growth cools or higher-paying employers decide to expand elsewhere. When a market is priced for near perfection, even minor disappointments can have outsized consequences. In 2026, Columbus is closer to that edge than many people are willing to acknowledge. Number 2, Cincinnati. Cincinnati blends riverfront heritage, hillside neighborhoods, and a mix of long-established wealth alongside newer waves of investment. For years, it carried a reputation as a careful, steady metro, far less volatile than many Sunbelt boomtowns. That image attracted buyers and investors who wanted dependable returns without dramatic swings. The past few years put that assumption to the test. When borrowing costs fell, interest in Cincinnati surged. Neighborhoods near downtown and close to major employment hubs saw renovated homes selling at prices that would have sounded far-fetched just 10 years ago. Breweries, restaurants, and entertainment districts helped fuel a powerful revival narrative, while suburbs across the river and along the Beltway posted rapid appreciation of their own. By 2026, signs are emerging that the market may have pushed too far, too fast. Some once trendy areas now feel stretched thin. Modest houses on tight lots carry monthly payments that feel heavy relative to local wages. In several jurisdictions, property taxes have risen to reflect past price jumps, adding another layer of cost for homeowners. For investors, higher interest rates have reshaped the math entirely. Rentals that looked profitable when financing was cheap no longer perform the same way when borrowing costs double. Vacancies are becoming more common in certain segments, especially in older buildings that lack modern features. Landlords are facing tough choices: either pour more money into upgrades or accept losses and move on. Cincinnati's geography adds another layer of complexity. Hillside neighborhoods can come with landslide risks or persistent drainage problems. River-adjacent properties offer beautiful views but carry real flood exposure. Insurance companies are increasingly factoring those risks into pricing, and buyers who fall in love with scenery are sometimes shocked when they see the actual cost of coverage. Cincinnati still has genuine strengths, but those strengths don't shield every buyer from downside risk. In 2026, the most vulnerable are those who stretch to the very top of what they could qualify for in areas driven more by buzz than by long-term fundamentals. If you're thinking about moving to Cincinnati, this is a moment to be cautious and conservative, not aggressive. Number 1, Cleveland. Cleveland earns the top spot on this list because it bundles nearly every risk we've talked about into a single market. It's a legacy industrial city sitting on the edge of the Great Lakes, with pockets of genuine renewal alongside vast areas that have seen decades of disinvestment. For years, the sales pitch was clear. Cleveland was the Midwest's best bargain, offering massive upside if you chose the right neighborhood. In 2026, that promise looks far more complicated. Certain downtown districts and parts of the near west side did experience real change. Stadium projects, entertainment zones, renovated lofts, and new restaurants generated buzz and optimism. Home prices climbed sharply from extremely low starting points, reaching levels that stunned longtime residents. Outside buyers watched those charts rise and rushed in, music, buying rentals, flips, and small portfolios in hopes of riding the momentum. The problem is that the broader city never fully shared in that rebound. Cleveland continues to struggle with population decline, entrenched poverty, and uneven public services. For every carefully marketed block, there are many more streets weighed down by vacant houses, empty lots, and aging infrastructure that drags on overall values. When interest rates rose and investor excitement cooled, the thin layer of demand supporting higher prices in select hotspots began to disappear. Cleveland also faces direct environmental and infrastructure pressures. Lake effect storms, recurring flooding issues, and vulnerable low-lying neighborhoods all add to long-term risk. Concerns about aging water and sewer systems push maintenance costs higher. Inspection reports frequently flag roof damage, foundation problems, and persistent moisture issues, while insurance premiums and deductibles continue adjusting upward in response. For homeowners who bought into the growth narrative near the peak, 2026 has been unforgiving. Some now owe more on their mortgages than a realistic sale would bring. Others are learning that attracting a buyer willing to meet their asking price is far harder than it seemed when headlines focused on revitalization. Cleveland still has committed residents and real potential, but potential alone doesn't erase risk. Right now, it stands as the clearest example in Ohio of a market where the gap between optimistic marketing and street-level reality has grown uncomfortably wide. That's why it claims the #1 spot on this list of Ohio cities where the housing market is starting to collapse in 2026. So what does this tour through Ohio actually tell us? Home prices ran ahead of local incomes. Investors crowded into the same strategies. Aging homes and outdated infrastructure were overlooked during the rush, only to become expensive liabilities once the bills came due. If you're thinking about buying in any of these cities, you can't focus on sticker price alone. You have to factor in the full cost of ownership, job stability, insurance, utilities, taxes, and the true strength of the local economy. Most importantly, ask whether the people who keep the city running can still afford to live there. If this breakdown from Discover the Cities helped you see Ohio's housing landscape more clearly, take 2 quick steps. Music. First, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into markets quietly shifting beneath the surface. Second, let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what you're seeing on the ground. Are prices holding steady, slipping, or already cracking? Because the 2026 housing reset isn't just a coastal story. It's moving through the heartland right now.